Kia ora everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Pavilion project. So you're tuning into Tawck GBAK TMD MSK from Auckland, New Zealand. So, for the people tuning in for the first time, this series is a collaborative project between Eke Panuku, students from School of Architecture at Unitec, and also local artists from Aotearoa. So the Pavilion project was previously located in Avondale, but has now been relocated in Henderson, and basically artists will repaint the structure every 2 months and give it a bit of a revamp. We sit down and have a little bit of a chat and understand their kind of background. In previous iterations, we have had some incredible artwork, and in its new location, we will continue this legacy. And in today's episode, we have a really great friend of mine who's joining us, graffiti artist, tattooist, muralist, business owner, and travelling extraordinaire, Tawck GBAK. So, thank you so much, Tawck, for joining us. It's obviously awesome to have you finally sit down with me and for us to have this chat. How many years have I known you?
It's over 20 years.
It's crazy that it's kind of taken this long for us to sit down and have a chat, but I'm really excited to share this conversation with everybody and understand a little bit about your kind of journey. And I guess so to kind of kick off, and just so the audience knows who you are, could you introduce yourself and let us know where you come from?
So I was born and raised in West Auckland, and I come from the north, a little place called Pakotai, just past Whangarei. That's sort of where I whakapapa back to. But yeah, did all my schooling and stuff, and started from about Waterview, and then worked our way from Gleneden to Te Aratu, and that's sort of where we resided most of our, from a child to when we were a teenager, and then from then onwards we started to branch out from there.
And what was the reason for kind of migrating from up north to Auckland?
Yeah, we went up north for about maybe 2-3 years, and then an event took place in our family, and then we decided to move back to Auckland, and that's sort of where things sort of kicked off. And now I've actually gone back up north, and I've been up there for maybe the last 11 years.
Could you describe what life was like for you as a kind of young teenager?
Well, I didn't really know much. I guess from intermediate to maybe beginning of high school, graffiti didn't even cross my mind. I didn't really see any of that stuff. Me and my brother we actually were b-boys from as a teenager till I guess when we left school. Yeah, it wasn't until I hit high school when I played a lot of sports actually. Yeah, that's what I thought I was gonna league. Yeah, that was my goal as a child. I got a few head injuries all in a row, and I was just keen to get on the field, but that kind of ended that career. Yeah, and then once I got into breakdancing, got an injury there, then realised, shit, that maybe that's probably not the path I should take. And I was always kind of dabbling in art, and then one kid he did my title page, and this is in high school. And then after that moment, it was like basically the first bit of graffiti that I had seen, and then I was just hooked after that. Yeah, in science. Yeah, this was at Kelston Boys. Yeah, because when he asked, he said, I'll do your title page, and I was like, I could just do my own. But he did it. I let him do it, and then
Did you know that he was doing graffiti though?
Yeah, he did graffiti, but see, at the time I didn't really know much about it. I used to wonder why people did it in the first place. But yeah, after he done that, I was just like searching everything I knew about it, and I started to look at graffiti a lot different.
You mentioned that you were a b-boy. The obvious thing that kind of springs to mind for me is obviously the larger conversation around hip-hop. Were you influenced by that, or was it just the breaking part that you were kind of drawn to?
At the time, hip-hop in general was like, you had that 4 elements sort of thing, and we had a friend, DJ O, he was already like dabbling in DJing, and you know, and then you had your other friends who did like freestyles, and then, you know, you kind of thought, oh, well, I'm good at drawing or can b-boy, so that you sort of like found your place. Yeah, that's kind of how I fell into the graffiti side of things.
And what period of time was this?
From, I think it was intermediate, I b-boyed all the way through to 7th form. I left school in 7th form. I didn't complete that year. Early 2000s. Yeah, probably even late 90s in terms of b-boying, and then I think graffiti probably kicked in. Maybe I was 3rd form.
I mean, that's quite early. So when you started kind of getting into graph in 3rd form, did you start noticing it everywhere else kind of in your environment beyond what your friends did?
My brother he actually started before me. Yeah, I was like, what are you doing that for? And then, you know, and I remember driving past the motorway and I was looking at some of the stuff, and Smack was one on this, the Western motorway. And I said to my mum, I was like, man, I wonder why people do that for. And yeah, little did I know that I would be like obsessed with this craft, you know, in the years to come. But yeah, at the time I didn't really know too much people doing it. I just wanted to write my name on the wall, and then that kind of just stemmed from there. Started, I guess, once you have like your groups of friends in school, and they're always different too, like they're all doing different things with what they like, so it was very hard to find like a group of friends that did graffiti. So when you found them, you sort of things evolved from that.
Yeah, totally, man. And I mean, it's obviously the era before social media, so were there many other kids that you knew of at your school that did graffiti?
Yes, but at the time I didn't know. Like, Dest was one. Yeah, so we were actually in the same school, same year. But I didn't know that he did graffiti, and then also a few other guys that I played league with, they also done graffiti. But yeah, I found out years later that they were this person, and I was like, oh shit, like I didn't know you were this person. And yeah, and then we just ended up hanging out more and making more graffiti, I guess, as the years went on.
I recall seeing some images of your graph that you did at your high school kind of way back when I initially met you, and I was actually quite surprised because they let you paint some of the rooms or the walls in the classroom. So what was all that about?
Yeah, so I had an art teacher, Miss Taite was her name. She really supported that graffiti path, and she helped me to do some of these murals throughout the school. So I think I remember doing 2, and I really asked her, oh, I need to use spray paint, and I didn't really know how to use it. So yeah, the school paid for it, but yeah, I had no idea like can control, whatnot, so most of it I just like brushed it, and then I just signed our names off with the spray cans because I didn't really know how to cut back or even lay it out. I just basically wrote letters. I can't remember what it looks like, but yeah, it was like, I think I used spray coat from the warehouse. Yeah, because the school didn't have that big of a budget, and I guess quality paint at the time wasn't really available.
I mean, that's a really great point there, because having a supportive art teacher is obviously critical to that kind of initial journey and stepping into graph. And people like those are obviously really important for young people, and how it kind of shapes their decisions in that early stage of their life. At that point in time, did you already have a vision or an idea of that you wanted to be an artist?
Well, always had like, my friends, they said, oh, you should, pursue art. But at the time, when I thought about creative jobs, it was like a graphic designer, and heaps of people said to do tattoos, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I, feel confident doing that kind of stuff, and I don't know if graphic design is a path I would want to take. One of my other art teachers, when I tried to study graffiti, she said, told me that graffiti wasn't an art form. and that almost like killed that dream. But I guess maybe as a teenager I kind of rebelled on that remark. Yeah, and then having my other teacher, who she was like, I think she did sculpture. I did sculpture with her. She encouraged that idea to pursue graffiti. If I see her now, I'd probably thank her, the one that told me not to do it, because that was what I needed to really just like go for it. And when I look at like, you know, anyone that's done anything big, it's usually from a massive failure or someone probably telling them they can't do it. So that was probably the fuel that I needed to get things started. But I had no direction of where I wanted to go with it, in terms of career wise.
And as you were getting more kind of interested in and involved with graffiti at that early stage, once again, this is pre-internet era, do you recall kind of what source material that you had? Like, was it magazines or books, or what was the kind of source of inspiration for you?
At the time, like, internet wasn't that big, and we didn't have internet at our house, so the only way we had access to internet was at school. But even that internet was pretty slow. But I did come across like the Source magazine. So me and my brother used to go down to one of the bookshops, and we used to rack a few of those Source magazines, because at the back they had maybe a 4 page spread of graffiti, and that was basically my only access to see like stuff. And I saw stuff like a lot of murals from like Tat's crew, which were like even to this day I still look up to them. It blew my mind, and then when I realized that we had artists here like from TMD that were creating like, you know, that similar caliber, I started to really search the streets of Auckland to find some of these walls, and I just wanted to see them up close, you know, and try and break things down and see how they did it. But yeah, there was, I think Cantu, he had a website back then, and when the teacher wasn't looking, I used to print off like heaps of his images, and then go home and just sort of study like how he did his letters, how did he outline, or his characters. But yeah, that was my first sort of insight to it, or in terms of like murals, the mural side of things.
And after we depart from high school, what are the next steps for your journey with graffiti?
At the time, I just wanted to just do heaps of illegal graffiti tags. There was like one crew in particular, RB crew. They were like one that I really aspired to sort of paint like when I saw their large stuff. For me, they were like a big inspiration, and I was like, fuck, I want to do things like that. And then when I met the likes of you and Dest.
But hold on, before we get to that part where you met us, you were already part of another crew called GB. Could you tell us a little bit about what that was? Could you tell us a little bit about what that crew was and the story of how that kind of started?
Yeah, how that happened was Hero, he actually came from St. Paul's, and he was like a new student when I moved to Rutherford High School out West Auckland, and I just saw him doing straights across the room, and I was like, fuck, who's this guy? And so I went to go introduce myself, and yeah, then long story short, I found out who he was. Yeah, we ended up painting for a few years. And we used to get those like all-day bus passes, and he kind of introduced us or showed us the ropes to the central scene. That's where like I saw all the meanest hand styles, and like basically took photos of that and then try to do the same thing in our little neighborhood, our West Auckland. And then I guess once that neighborhood got too small, then we started to branch out from that. Yeah, then we met you guys, and then
Yeah, but could you refresh my memory as to how we met?
Some of the guys from Kelston painted, and we linked up. They used to write SC Crew, who was also, and they used to hang out with Dest, and then I think it was maybe Marley, I think might have, or did Marley meet you? And then we linked up in Te Pūtahi, and then from that point on we started doing, I think we just started hitting the motorways. And then there was that battle between, I guess, our crew and AK. We used to go to parties together, and straight after that we would do drunk tags, and then got to the point where none of us wanted to drop either crew to join the other one. And I recall one time, I think it was on the Takapuna motorway, Des jumped out and yelled out and said, do the GB first. And he did, knowing he was AK. And as he did it, that's when I saw it, and then I realized, like, fuck, we don't have to drop one crew, why don't we just join them together? And then off the back of that, we did that Hooked on Fishbowl out Te Pūtahi, and I guess that was like our first big crew production. Now that I think about it, it wasn't really a production, they were just like pieces stacked on pieces. But I remember it was from that motorway tag that Dest had done, and then I think from that point we did it on the wall, and it looked really cool together, because you wouldn't do AKGB, it just didn't sound right, or sounded funny. So that's how that kind of came together, and everyone was cool about it. I guess with the numbers that we had joining both the crews, and being inspired by like RB crew, doing these large things seemed a lot more achievable than if you only had like two people. So that's sort of in a nutshell up until I was like maybe 19 or 20.
And after GBAK was formed and being part of that crew, what did graffiti mean to you then?
Because everyone was so passionate about it, in every sort of aspect. I guess as pieces we probably weren't quite there, but everyone was down for the tags. Like, I guess we were just hardcore vandals, and we were okay with that, especially amongst our peers. If we saw like other crews going out, we're like, fuck, we have to put some work in. But then there came times like where we actually just battled ourselves, like, you guys jump in that car, you guys jump in this car, alright, you go to the shore, we'll do West Auckland or whatever, and then we'll meet back here at say whatever time, and then see who could do the most. Used to play things like shotgun, whoever's in the front, everyone in that car gets to pick your spots. And it was during the day. I remember my brother got the short end of the straw when we played that game. We gave him all the hardest ones. But at the time it just felt like a game, and I never really saw it as a career. I think it just kind of levitated into a career as the more times like I got arrested, and when I realized I wasn't gonna stop, I thought, fuck, if I keep doing this, I'm going straight to jail. So I tried to figure out how I could I guess make something more of it, because I can't keep going at this pace for forever and then just keep getting arrested. So I thought, well, I'm pretty good at art, so maybe I can pursue some form of creative career with it and see how that goes.
I recall that in one night, you and a couple of the boys had rocked like an awesome spot on the motorway, which was obviously, super visible, legible, and massive. For me, that was an iconic spot. And so could you tell us a little bit about how the story of how that kind of went?
So I think this was probably the first big GBAK that took place, and yeah, I noticed that they had just cleared all these trees, and I thought, fuck, this is like the spot. And I kind of talked Hero and my other friend Peter into doing it, and I didn't really think we could be seen from the road, and I thought, oh yeah, sweet, no, we can do this. We took a ladder and everything, and yeah, we chromed the whole thing out. And then I remember I rang you the next day, and I said, oh, have you driven past Spaghetti Junction? And he was like, and you said, nah. And I was like, call me back when you drive past. And then, yeah, I just remember you ringing saying, bro. But I think after that really encouraged all of us to just work as a team. And then we basically just damaged by numbers, and it felt like effortless when you had that much, and that much people committed to the cause as well. But yeah, that was probably a pinnacle moment.
That was definitely a pinnacle moment, because I think that and some other stompers that we did really put us on the map within the Auckland graffiti scene, at least. But funnily enough, there's actually an interesting story which comes after that blocky that you guys did. Could you tell us a little bit about that story?
There was one piece in the corner. We went over it, and he didn't really take a liking to it, because a few days later he came back and went over it, and then I think the same night we got a phone call that it was getting done over. So yeah, that same night turned up and he had left, and then yeah, just the paint was still wet, and then just chromed it back out. Then he came back, he crossed it out, but he marked it out high. So then we came back, then we chromed it out. But back then, that was just how things were. You kind of had to stand your ground. But that, that continued, that kind of beef, years to come. And I look back and sort of, I cherish those moments, the hard times. Kind of shapes you into the person you are. Yeah, it was all fun and games, and I'd like to think now, I caught up with one of them, and man, we have having like mean yarns, having a laugh, and but yeah, it was just like that with that was just graffiti in general in that time. It was very hostile.
It's a question that I always ask everyone that's involved in graffiti, but I also felt like at that time it was quite hostile. So why do you think that was the case?
Yeah, I don't know if it was just like that in New Zealand, but I think in general people really enjoyed going out and fighting like a lot, and I guess when it came to graffiti it was almost like, if you look at it, it was almost territorial as well. Like, so if you kind of went over someone, they took it real personal, and you didn't have to say much you could call someone a bro and they'd be like, fuck, I'm not your bro, and then next thing you know, you're having a punch up. So you had to tread lightly with anything you did, even if you played sports or something, it was. But yeah, graffiti in particular, like, yeah, you had to really stand your ground, or else everyone will just kind of diss everything you've got.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there. And I also remember hearing stories of just like people getting stalked, at the wall, or if, you're not careful, people would stalk you for your pain, or, give you a beat down because you went over this person and so forth. But, do you think that kind of mentality or attitudes kind of still exist in the graffiti scene now?
Nah, I don't think it really exists now. But yeah, I did hear of a lot of stories, from some of the boys that actually, from other crews that actually did that to riders. But yeah, it never happened to me. But yeah, I did see it or hear about it.
So during this time, You were obviously quite active and representing the crew. What kind of, I guess, attitudes or philosophies or beliefs did you have around graffiti at that time? And do you think you still follow those rules now?
I just wanted to tag, and I knew that if I went over someone, then that comes with like there's a consequence or to doing that. So over the years I kind of learned those unwritten rules of what, the more I started to learn about graffiti, what you can and can't do. I didn't believe in all of it. Oh, like tagging for a piece or stuff like that. If you're going to go over something, then try give that piece the justice that it deserves, unless you're going there to specifically diss it. So yeah, if I couldn't match it or do something better, then I'll just leave it. And I guess that's just sort of where that respect comes in. When I learned who were the old boys, like the old writers, I kind of just left their stuff. But at the time when I first started, I didn't know who anyone was. It was just like toy stage. But the more I did it, the more I started to learn more about the culture and try to be respectful of it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there was actually one story that I want you to share with all of us, if possible. There was one day that we went out racking, to get some paint and stuff, but the ending to that day was actually quite crazy.
Yeah, I just remember me and Des were chilling in the car. He was smoking weed and I was drinking in the back. And you and my brother went in, and all I heard was the Bunnings worker yelling out, "Hey, come back here." And I just saw my brother nos it straight past the car. And then the Bunnings worker took like maybe 2 steps out the door and tried to run, and he pulled a hammy or something. And he had got away. And I was like, fuck, what do we do? Do we wait for burst, or do we just sit tight, go look for Haz? And then I jumped in the front seat and I thought, fuck it, we'll go get him. Drove up, tried to find him, and then all of a sudden he just pops out of nowhere and he's trying to open the back door on Des' side.
Who is?
Haz. Yeah, Hazza. And then Des was too blazed and he was just staring at him. So then he ran round to my side and I opened the door for him, unlocked it, and then this Bunnings worker comes running up towards the car, throws a punch, Des' head, and it kind of just grazes the top, and he was just like, yells out, "Fucking gap it." So I pulled out onto the main road. The guy started holding onto like the window frame, and the car was so slow, like I just had foot down. I thought he was like holding the car back, that's how slow it was going. And then as it started to pick up speed, he must have like misplaced his footing, and I just felt the back wheel roll over something, and I just looked in the rear view mirror and I saw him spit out the back, and then he limped back to the car. And in that moment I was like, fuck, I'm going to jail for this one. So I ran like 2 red lights, and someone else must have been driving his car, because they just caught up straight away. Then I pulled over and my brother just said, "Oh, fuck, it was me." And then brother jumps into their car. The guy told us to follow us back to the store, and I was like, "Oh, okay, sweet," because he said he got the number plate, but it wasn't my car, so I didn't really care. And then I was like, "Oh, yep, sweet." Followed him. As soon as he turned left, I turned right, and then I called you and just said, "Man, told you what happened," and then we picked you up. And then because he was underage, he ended up getting no charge, but that could have gone really bad. I think I was like maybe 18 or 17 maybe. I was on my learners, but I was only on my learner's license at the time. Probably not one of my proudest moments, but it definitely made me was almost probably one of my turning points as well for graffiti, like in terms of racking paint, because that could have gone really bad. Yeah.
So stepping away from racking for a moment and kind of coming back to the piecing part, and what you do with graffiti, do you recall when you painted your first piece?
I think it was with me, you, Dest and Hazza on that little shop in Chiaratu. That one was actually probably the first one before we hit the hooked on fish one. And we must have done like 2 meter size pieces. Like the wall wasn't that big. But yeah, that was probably my first. Oh no, actually, I lie. That was my first legal one, but I tried to do a piece down this alleyway close to school, because I knew that's where all the smokers used to hang. And yeah, I did like a 2-color Tawck piece down there, and it stayed for a long time. But I used to just stare at it and try to figure out, how I could improve it going forward. But yeah, that was probably my first piece that I had done. And then after that, there was also another alleyway just down maybe like 50 meters from my house, and I did like a shoe polish. Tried to do a shoe polish 3D piece, which was toy as. But yeah, that basically was the first one I think I had done.
I'm pretty sure all of our first pieces were pretty toy. I'm not sure if I've even got a picture of it. But kind of coming back to those early stages of doing piecing, what style of lettering were you influenced by at that time?
I would say it was very Cantu inspired. But a lot of the other stuff was basically just block style letters. I try to keep it as simple as possible. I never really try to do like a wild piece, because maybe in my sketchbooks, but I knew it wasn't achievable painting. Yeah, so I try to just stick to what I know at the time.
And how did you come up with the name Tawck? Is that a name that you've had for like the whole time you've painted graffiti?
I remember back in school I did, so I had a few names. Like I actually used to have Haz, and then I gave that to my brother. I remember studying the bird, the harrier hawk, and I liked the letters from the AWK, but I didn't necessarily like the H. That's why I gave Haz to Kara. So I went through the alphabet, and then I got rid of the H and I just started replacing it with different letters, and then I got to the T and I was like, oh yeah, that'll be a nice one for straights. So that's how that happened. I ended up getting caught on a rooftop in Grey Lynn, and I didn't want to come up with another name, so then I just added the C, and then it just stuck, and it's been that ever since.
So as you started to progress kind of with the piecing, who would you say were some local writers that you kind of took inspiration from or were influenced by?
Askew was a big one. That was who and why? That was who DJO had introduced me to. He said, "Oh man, you need to look at his stuff," and I didn't know who any TMD was at the time. And then he took me down to, I think it was Oriental Markets. They used to paint down where Britomart used to be. And then that's where I saw there was like Agent and Fat One. Probably those three stood out to me the most. And Deos, because he was doing characters at the time. I remember, because I lived out West Auckland, Agent, I actually did a workshop with him. That's how I knew of him. And then, when you meet someone, you start to see their stuff. And kind of going off topic here, but 18 or something years later, we crossed paths again in Ponsonby, and he was like, "Oh, what do you write?" And then I knew it was him. And then I said to him, "Oh, bro, you probably won't remember me, but 18 years ago you did a workshop out Waikimiti, and that's what got me into doing pieces." So I have him to thank for that aspect of things. So I just followed his work ever since that workshop, because I never sort of really aspired to do it because I didn't really know how it was done until that workshop. And then so I remember he painted like a lion, and he kind of just like showed you how to do cutbacks and stuff like that, which are still things that I apply to this day. Anyone that wants to learn, that's sort of what I try to teach. If it worked for me, then maybe it'll work for them. Even to this day, I still think he's a legend in New Zealand graffiti scene.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Agent's like an absolute killer, and I'm sure he's on like many people's kind of top writers list. And probably I would say that one of my favorite things from him that I remember seeing was his stylized pilot marker that he painted on like a power box or something like that. That was super fresh and just like black and white, I think. But I guess kind of coming back to you, it's actually a great start to understanding your journey in graffiti. But kind of during this time, were you ever involved in any other events or kind of networking with other writers, like battles or things like that?
Yes, we've like done battles and stuff. I think maybe the Hip Hop Summit was one. I think that was first, and then we did the Right for Gold battle, which was on K Road, so the New Zealand one, and then TMD won that one.
Could you refresh my memory on these battles? Because I know that there was the Right for Gold event, which was hosted in Auckland, but there was also another event called Kings of Style, which was run by TMD. But I remember out of both of those events, we actually invited your dad to come paint with us.
He had never used a spray can, and we were, going up against the likes of, RTR, TS Crew, TMD. So we were punching, trying to punch. But I guess we got burnt pretty bad. But I think from that day on, we saw the gap between the crews, and I guess we just worked over the years to close that gap. That was sort of the drive, but still continue to do illegal graffiti. But I guess we just were trying to close that gap technically or technical wise, and stylistically, because I guess we were still trying to find our place or where we were going with it, because I think each person was wanting to pursue like panels more, or one wants to piece more, or one wants to bomb more than the other. So, but it was cool, everyone kind of just did their own thing.
I just want to come back to your dad for a moment, and obviously your dad's incredibly talented artist, and creatively he's amazing, and he knows how to paint, but I'm interested to know what his role has been in your life, and in relation to art.
Yeah, I didn't really touch on that last bit properly with him. We got him on the wall because he can basically like paint anything, almost like animate, and we thought, oh man, we'll get him on our character or background or something, because whatever he does, he's already had experience painting large scale murals, but all with brush. And we had a coot painting beside us, which was like immense pressure, because that guy was already doing realism at the beginning of like our careers. And yeah, I remember he ended up painting like a barbarian, sort of just slaying like a whole sort of a scene of warriors. That's how that wall went down, with that zero tolerance one. Unfortunately, we didn't come through with the goods, but yeah, I think we took a lot of lessons from that. But yeah, growing up, he'd been painting since before we were born, so we kind of grew up around that environment, and he was painting a lot back then, so we kind of just levitated towards it, me and my brother. We just try to paint a lot like him. He was painting a lot of like fantasy art, so in particular Frank Frazetta, Boris, I think it's Vallejo, how you pronounce his last name. But yeah, he used to draw drawings of stuff like that, and we used to colour them in. I remember I took one of them to primary school, and they're kind of like that Xena warrior princess, so he used to draw them in like all these warrior bikinis and stuff like that with swords and skulls. And I remember my art teacher, she ripped up one of the drawings. I can't remember if she spoke to Dad about the certain kinds of things. I think I was like maybe first or second year of primary school, you know, I was colouring in these kinds of paintings and drawings. But yeah, I used to paint a lot of that stuff, and when I got into graffiti, I kind of steered away from that. And then it wasn't until maybe the middle of my graffiti I started to bring it through and do more characters or maybe more realism and stuff like that.
Was he always supportive of you guys doing graffiti?
Yeah, the way I remember he said to me when some of his friends were having issues with their kids, you know, and they were committing like armed robberies or, you know, doing mad drugs, and I think they said to him like, man, how do you keep your boys in line? And he goes, oh, if graffiti's the worst thing that my boys are going to do, then I don't have a problem with that. There's a lot worse things we could be doing. But I think maybe he saw the potential in it before we saw it. But yeah, he was definitely supportive of it.
Once again, it seems like another critical person or important person that's kind of supported you quite early on, and that's really awesome to hear, because like I said, we need those types of people in our lives. But while we're on the topic of family, you mentioned quite a lot about your brother, who obviously is Hazza. What role has he played in your childhood and kind of upbringing?
Well, we did everything together. You know, we used to fight as brothers, fight each other, and we used to draw across him being the younger brother. He used to copy a lot, and I used to get annoyed, like, fuck, stop copying me. And then I just remember, we used to just draw across the table at our nana's all the time. And if I'm drawing something, I'll look over and I'm like, fuck, you're drawing the same thing, stop copying me. But as we got older, we kind of started to work more and more closer together, and we kind of, graffiti sort of like kept us connected, and we've always kind of just ventured off and painted this and painted that, did this style and did that style, and didn't really have a style for years. But I think it wasn't a bad thing. But yeah, we were definitely more supportive towards each other in our later, growing up. When I see how hard he pushes, that just inspires me to want to do the same, and also think outside the box. Not trying to do. Someone gives you like a concept, like, do you see it for what it is, or do you take it and pull it apart and put it back together a completely different way? So I've always liked his way of thinking.
And what does brotherhood mean to you?
Connected. I think what we have is special. I feel like it's a rare thing to have like a sibling pursue the same thing that you're doing, whether it's like sports or whatnot. So I think kind of blessed to have a sibling do the same thing and have equal views almost on what we both want out of our art and what we also put back into it. So we get to kind of do this parallel journey together, but both being having our own sort of authenticness.
Do you guys get the opportunity to collaborate much?
It's very rare. I'm surprised we haven't done more, but I guess that's just sort of where travel got in the way. We sort of like drifted apart. We knew we were both still painting, but we kind of when we got the opportunity to paint together, we always try to seize the moment. And I guess like now, we did one project in Dubai where we represented Aotearoa, and I never thought from doing tags that I'd be spraying and representing like the black jersey, and then to do it with like my brother, that was different. And then from that moment on, I think we realized like, it doesn't make sense for you to just, you do you and I do me. So I think we've seen like potential that if we work together, we could probably, make something special. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, man. And what do you think is one of the greatest achievements or milestones that you've made in graffiti so far?
To still be doing it. Yeah, and still want to do it, I've seen people come and go over the years. I see people start, and then I see them finish. Yeah, I think like my passion for it, like I still love it, just like when I first got into it. Yeah, if I'm still doing it, then yeah, that's probably my...
But I mean, what do you want to achieve from graffiti these days? Is it still the same things that you wanted as a teenager, or have these kind of goals or objectives kind of shifted as you've become older?
It's a good question because it doesn't really give you anything back. It's one of probably the only art forms where you put everything on the line every time, and you risk like your freedom, your money, for what? Like you just get your photo, and maybe other people that do graffiti, or maybe homeless, or no one ever sees it.
But is that what makes it so pure though? I mean, it's something that's exclusively for you, it's for nobody else, and you can't necessarily put a price on it. There's no other objective than to paint.
Yeah, that's why I like it. It's, if no one sees it, I'm okay with that. As long as I document it, it gets archived, and then and I'll reflect back on what I can learn off that one particular thing or piece. I don't really know sort of what I...
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because we've also interviewed another artist a little while ago by the name of Fiasco. He's a writer based in Dunedin. He pointed out when he's active and painting heaps of graffiti, it's kind of like an escapism for him from reality, and maybe his life's not going so well. But when he's not painting, his life is going incredibly well with his family, and he's having a great time. So I thought that was quite an interesting perspective from a person that's been in the game for such a long time, and just that, as you get older, you just have different relationship with graffiti than compared to, say, maybe a teenager who might be looking for something quite different and maybe validation from his friends.
Like, I definitely don't go out as much as I used to, but all the times I got caught doing it, that's sort of when I realized, man, I can't keep this pace up and continue to just keep smashing it, or there'll be zero graffiti. I guess like I decided to pace myself from there on out. I will always do it. I don't necessarily do it where I stay, but when I travel, that's usually when that 17-year-old comes out again. Basically like a volcano, just dormant, and then as soon as the travel's on.
I mean, spraycations are definitely a great opportunity to get inspired and kind of get loose. But beyond graffiti, we're going to step into a different space. I know you also operate in the realms of tattooing. So could you tell me how you got involved into tattooing, and kind of, I guess, was it something that you transitioned to from graffiti, or was it something that you've always been interested in? Obviously within the tattooing, you're creating a totally different body of work and working a different medium. So I'm interested in knowing what kind of made you kind of step into that space.
Well, as kids, Dad actually made like a homemade tattoo machine, and he used to tattoo all of his friends. So I saw it from a young age. I always thought it was cool. I didn't think I would get any. I didn't think I would do it. But yeah, the years later, one of the bros was tattooing a lot of the boys, and he had moved back from Australia.
Who was that, sorry?
Kapili. I was hearing his name a lot, and I was thinking, oh, fuck, one, no, it can't be that. And then he moved, and then he must have come back, and he started tattooing a lot of the boys. Yeah, one of my friends who was getting tattooed by him said, oh, yeah, gonna go see my artist. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I tagged along, and then when I realized it was the same guy, it's like, oh, shit. Yeah, long story short, I think he stayed like out South Auckland or East, but he was doing a lot of the boys in Central, and I said, oh man, you can just use my place if you want. And at the time, I still wasn't interested in doing it. I just thought, oh, well, if it's the boys, then you can just use my place. Like I had my own spot across the road from Eden Park. So I just let him tattoo, and then I think he went into Two Hands when they were on Simon Street. And when I went in there one day, and I got him to finish off one of the pieces he had done on me, that's when I saw what the environment was like in the studio. And I asked him, I was like, oh man, what's this place like? Like, what's it like tattooing? And he said, fuck, it's me. And then I picked his brain a little bit, and then, yeah, he helped me to get my first good machine. So I got a workhorse irons machine. So yeah, he was basically my introduction into the tattoo scene that is today. He gave me some tips, but not a lot. But at the time I was car painting, so I was kind of just trying to figure it out from home.
Were you doing car painting full time?
I was doing a car painting apprenticeship, and I'd finished it and took it as far as I could. And then when I was tattooing from home, I was like, it was too hit and miss with the tattoos. And in that moment I was thinking, fuck, if I want to be good like I was at car painting, then I'm going to have to drop car painting. When you're dealing with skin, different parts of the body take the ink differently. So if I tattooed like a good piece of the body, then it would heal up like all good, and then I'd tattoo like a different part and I'll be like, but I did the same thing. The more you learn about how the body works, like with skin wise, then you know how to approach it. So, one particular area like the ribs or something, it's quite rubbery, so you have to really stretch it. But at the time I didn't really know, so I was kind of like butchering some of the jobs, and it took a few jobs to go bad that made me realize, like, man, if I want to be good at this like I was car painting, then I need to go all in and do it properly. So I did that for like maybe not even 5 months, on the weekends or after work. And then once I had decided that this is what I want to do, then I told my boss, like, look, I'm going to be here till the end of the year, and then that's me. I'm going to give up car painting.
And what was the catalyst or like the final straw that made you say, hey, I'm going to quit this car painting gig and I'm going to go take tattooing seriously as a full-time career?
Well, I had gone as far as I could with car painting. I had achieved everything and some in that realm, so I couldn't grow anymore there. And I wanted to, if I could apply that same method and apply it to tattooing, my approach to painting cars, then I felt like I could do something with it. I stopped tattooing and I went back to drawing, because I thought, well, if I'm going to get into a shop, I need to produce a portfolio, because producing like shitty tattoos from home is probably not the way to go about it. Only because I had a few friends that had been tattooing, so they kind of gave me a bit of an insight to what I should do, so I was like pretty thankful for that. But yeah, I just worked on my portfolio. Then I got a one-way ticket with Rico and from the crew, and we ended up doing the States for almost 2 months, I think it was, and then we ended up in England, London, and I was trying to land an apprenticeship over there, and then I got one within 2 days, and yeah, before you knew it, I was heading south to a little place called Bournemouth, and that's where my tattoo career kicked off. Like, professionally, it kicked off overseas, yeah. I guess that kind of pressure on myself was like, failure just wasn't an option. Being so far from home, I didn't have like I had to make it work. I'd kind of told everyone this is what I'm going to do, so it needs to happen. At the beginning it was hard because I remember they just threw me straight in and made me tattoo, which was probably a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. But yeah, good thing I got paid, bad thing I probably was doing not so good tattoos. I remember one week I made I think it was $30 or $60, which was not even enough to cover food. But that definitely helped drive that and make things happen. I drew a shit ton to really try to speed things up, try to draw more, learn more, ask more questions. I think at that time not many people knew that much. It was all kind of still people were kind of holding things and not really sharing too much information. So I knew I could draw. I just couldn't technically tattoo how I envisioned or wanted it to look. And I think if I was to do it again, then I would probably spend more time looking for a particular artist that I would want to learn under, as opposed to just trying to get in any door.
What do you mean by people withholding knowledge?
I guess that was just that old school mentality. And the more I speak to tattoo artists that have been doing it, even before my time, they had the same thing, but even worse. So, I feel maybe I didn't cop it as bad as how they had it.
But hold on, don't all tattooers want the general public to have good tattoos? I mean, I would imagine that tattooers don't want to have a bad reputation of bad tattoos being on people's skin, and wouldn't it make logical sense to share knowledge with everybody so that it elevates the tattoo culture?
But it's one of those things you can't go to university to learn how to tattoo. Even to this day you can't. At the time there was probably a lot of people doing apprenticeships, learning what they thought they needed to know, and then opening up, and it was happening a lot. And so for me going in, not really knowing that much about it, I was probably getting one of those kind of apprenticeships where you thought you were going to be learning, but someone was still learning at the same time. They hadn't had much experience. It's probably the better way to describe it.
I can't remember the time frame exactly, but I do recall that there was a period of time in maybe the mid-2000s where it felt like there was a huge tattoo boom, and almost every second person that I knew was doing a tattoo apprenticeship or had a tattoo machine, or suddenly there was just heaps of tattoo shops open.
Yeah, that was actually a global effect, I think, because even in Bournemouth there were 40 shops, and it wasn't really a big city. When I came back, I think the following year, there was 60 shops. So yeah, there was a lot. Probably out of those 60 there was probably maybe only 5 that were probably actually good, 5 artists, not 5 shops. It just got so diluted that anyone was just getting taken in. Yeah, I think now I don't know what the Auckland scene is like, but yeah, I think it's probably still the same. But I think for the Auckland or New Zealand scene, I think it's very high level. Now it would be hard to come across someone that's not good. Even people from home. I've seen some guys just producing some next level pieces. But back then, yeah, it was very hard to come by someone that was actually pretty good.
I know it's probably going to be difficult to answer this question, but who would you say are top 3 tattooists or tattoo studios in Aotearoa, or maybe even just people that kind of come to mind that have made some sort of relative impact on you?
I'm just going to name a whole studio because I think what they produce is really inspiring to me. Probably just say everyone from native studios, and that includes their past artists as well. I think everyone that's just come out of there is mean. Just the kind of moko that they do, I really gravitate towards. If I look at it from a graffiti perspective, like I'll look at it like style. So the style of tamako that they do, I've always loved it. They're just constantly pushing. I would say Xander from Hamilton, that guy's just way too clean. Like his tattoos are just, I've seen him tattoo in like up close when he came up to my studio, and yeah, he does simple but really well. And just because the stuff looks simple doesn't mean it's easy. They've got like a trad aspect to it, / neo-trad / realism, but he can kind of take it, he can flex with all three of them. I think I've never seen him do like a bad tattoo, and for him to consistently do it like that for that long, to me is inspiring, because I might do 3-4 tattoos good and then botch one, but he's just like consistent every time. Like from what I've seen, maybe he's done some that didn't go his way, but from what I see, yeah, that dude is just consistently consistent. I would probably say Shipshape. They're real versatile, and I think they really put New Zealand on the map in terms of realism. And they've had a good string of artists go through that studio that have put out some like insane work. Yeah, I guess coming up, those would probably be those for New Zealand.
I mean, those are some incredible tattooists and studios that you've just listed there, and I totally agree with you. I'm interested to know, how do those studios that you've just listed or mentioned stack up internationally with other, tattooists and studios overseas? Does New Zealand hold their own?
I rate us, to be honest. I rate us like, I've travelled 31 countries, worked in 28, and I think the level of New Zealand tattoos is extremely high. I think we are very unique, especially with our Māori and Pacific tribal style tattoos. That is just like at a level I've never ever seen it like right now. Like you've got the likes of Lance, Heeds, Gordon Toy, Tyler Jade, Andy Karoa. They're all just straight weapons, and they're evolving it that fast. Like it's almost hard to keep up if you're not doing it all the time. But it's good for the scene and for the culture. It's growing. If you were to say in the world, I would say we would fall definitely within the top, I would say 3. I think the level of tattoos in New Zealand is pretty high.
That's really awesome to hear. Has New Zealand always been in that top 3? Or has the quality of tattooing kind of just recently elevated to that level?
Well, I think with our tribal style tattoos that we have down here in New Zealand, they are very unique to us. So from the outside looking in, it's quite a sought after thing. That's always been a key style for, what would you call it? Yeah, it's unique to New Zealand. So it's what makes us different to the rest of the world. They can't do what we do. But, also having the amount of realism artists that we have now in New Zealand, and the level that do it, as well as neo-trad artists or even some Japanese artists that are coming out of here, trad. It's all inspiring. And to know that it's coming from here it makes you proud to say that like we've got some good tattoo artists coming out of this country.
That's awesome to hear, man. And I guess yeah, there's just so much kind of talent coming out of this country, and obviously I'm super proud of that as well, so it's great to hear it from you. At some point, you also opened up your own tattoo studio and started running your business. Could you tell me a little bit about which year that happened and how you even ended up deciding to go down this trajectory?
So my reason to travel was I wanted to see how shops run and take little bits and pieces that I thought I might like and then implement it into a space that I'll create. It didn't take long before I opened, so I returned. I think I opened 2013. A studio, and I had taken little bits and pieces from what I thought would work really well and just grew it over the years. So I had it for 8.5 years, that studio, and basically grew it from the ground up, and ended up closing it 2020 when the COVID kicked in. So the most we had at one time was, I think, 5 or 6 full-time artists, which was a lot. It came with its difficulties. I thought that if I create a really nice space that people would just focus on making nice mahi. But then I realized the difficulties of having a business, which was personalities. That's probably the hands down the hardest part. And then when I look back and I think about all the people I worked for, what was I like to them? And now I feel bad, for some of my old bosses that I worked for and probably was inconsistent with work. Now I know how they feel. But it had its highlights as well, when you saw achievements come from them. But it was something it didn't cross my mind when I first thought about opening a business.
The tattoo shop that you opened was up in Whangarei, and it must have been going well, because I recall that at some point your studio or team had won some sort of business awards a couple of years ago.
It was. We entered the Westpac Business Awards. It was I think it was run through the Chamber of Commerce in Whangarei. So it stretches all the way to the north. So I saw that as another challenge. I sort of thrive off those things because I think I keep bringing everything back to graffiti. Man, if we can make it from that, then, and if I apply that same can-do attitude, then I think anything is possible. So had a shot at that, and we ended up becoming finalists. I think on our first year we were finalists in 3 categories, and we took out 1 category, which was the Creative Excellence Award, and that just basically lit a fire, I guess, under our whole studio to that we can kind of do whatever. And with no business training, that was a milestone for me, to know that I had created it. And you're going up against other businesses that aren't studios. You could be, could be a fruit picking business that has 30 people or something. So you're going up against anyone, and to get that was a big milestone. And then we started chasing tattoo awards, and then we went back to I think 2 years later, and then we took out another award, and then I kind of just left it at that.
Congrats, man, that's really epic. And what I'm really beginning to see here is all of the stuff that you do. You're quite brave, you're a risk taker. Those are 2 qualities that I'm kind of drawing out from what you're saying. Whether it be you embracing graffiti and taking the risk to go do that stuff, or changing jobs and kind of giving up that security of full-time income, to traveling abroad and then starting your own business, which has its own kind of challenges and risks, especially that you didn't, because you haven't studied business, right? Fully take my hats off to you for delving into it and kind of going head first. Out of all those things, what would you say are 3 lessons or challenges that you've kind of learned from running your own business?
I'd probably do like a small business course. I'd probably focus on my time management side of things and invest money into people to do certain jobs, because at the beginning I was trying to micromanage everything, thinking, I can't afford to pay this person to do this, so I'll just have to do it myself. But I found once I just started paying people to do this, and then that was one less job that I had to do, which meant I got to do what I'm good at, which was put needles into skin or paint on walls.
But when you had your own shop, were you still tattooing or just managing the business and the kind of the staff?
See, that's where that time management came in, because I was still tattooing. I was also training people, also learning how to make our shop function so it works for us. Do it in a way where there's always going to be growth. Like, because if it gets to a certain point and I'm like, and I don't feel something's growing, I will come up with another idea, or I'll start pursuing something else. So it was always important to create goals, work towards them, but then also have the next one in place, because whilst things just start to feel stale,
Is there ever a metrics on how many tattooists there should be in one studio? Like, would you ever find a tattoo studio with like 20 artists or something? Or is there kind of like an optimal number of artists to make the studio run successfully?
It depends on the size of the building. Like, how I see a tattoo space, like with lots of artists, is different to probably how some other people see it. Like, I see it as like a creative hub, but some people see it as a place to make money, just solely for their own ego or whatnot. But yeah, I try to create like a creative hub. Yeah, it ended up turning out really well, and super proud of everyone that's come out of there as well.
Totally, man. And from what I saw at Memory Lane, the talent that you guys had in the studio, it was incredible. And all of those artists have gone on to do incredible things, either privately or in other studios. But yeah, some incredible stuff. And I guess kind of coming back to that point of the shop, we all know that nothing lasts forever, and Memory Lane did eventually close its doors. So what was the reason for closing up shop?
When that pandemic or COVID thing hit, and we had our first lockdown, the way I looked at it, I didn't want to lose everything I had worked hard for something that was out of my control. So if I'm going to close it, I'm going to close it on my terms. Reopening wasn't as daunting because I've already opened the business. So when I realized, it's not that hard, and then I was also coming up to the age of 35, and Europe, Prague, or Czech Republic, they had like a visa thing where you have to apply before you're 35. So I saw that as an opportunity. Like, man, I've wanted to live in Europe for, I go there every year. So if I can live there for like 1 year, then now's the opportunity, because once I hit 35, you can only do like 3-month stints. But I got there, and then less than a month they locked that place up. But we were still free to do almost whatever. We just couldn't really tattoo, and I wasn't there long enough to have created like a network. I had heaps of friends in other parts of Europe, but they weren't in Czech Republic. They were in like Finland or France or Spain, and I couldn't access those places for like months.
So after you closed the shop and you started traveling, what were, I guess, some kind of key highlights for you when you were traveling in Europe?
Food. Food is like that's definitely up there, when you're going to foreign countries. The art side of things, and their environment. So a lot of where I draw all my inspiration from, a lot of it doesn't even come from graffiti. So the reason I love Europe, or why I'm sort of drawn to Europe, is kind of like their architecture. Their graffiti scene is just like, it's not the same as Auckland. It's on another level. It's on steroids over there. And I guess the people, the people I've met, they've all helped sculpture who I am today, creatively, and I think as a person. That's sort of my big things for travel.
That's wicked, man. And who would you say are some notable people that you met on your travels, and why?
It seems biased, but I want to say like some of the boys from the crew. Only because I'm a fan of what they put out, Akobe, one in particular, Acob. I've been inspired by his works for years, and still am to this day. Probably Norm, because he's not only was I inspired by his graffiti, but also his tattooing. So I think that guy is like a huge like sort of inspiration, especially in the lettering realm. I feel like he pioneered, like, or he plays a big part in that realm, and how he crossed them over was inspiring, and it sort of pushed me to do what I do today. And his work ethic was, that guy just worked like nothing, tattooed, I don't know how many tattoos a day, but it was a lot, and then would go and paint a lot, and then party a lot, and travel a lot. So he just did everything. It definitely made you feel like you weren't doing enough. So, but having people like that, it inspired me. I think being content is just as the same as going backwards if you're not moving.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that when you've done something for so long, you might feel like you've plateaued and maybe there's no more to push, but there's always another level. But it's just a matter of whether or not you're willing to push it or not, and how to achieve it, obviously. But kind of just coming back to the tattooing for a moment, for the people that aren't familiar with what you do in that kind of tattooing realm, what kind of style of tattoos do you create?
I do everything, but not anymore. Now I've kind of narrowed. I can do everything. I just narrowed things down to 3 particular styles. So lettering, tamako, and realism. And I can pull from all those other styles if it's sort of related amongst those 3, but particularly those 3 in general. It's basically what I'm happy doing now. Whether it changes, I don't know, but I'm really enjoying just doing those 3, and all black and grey as well.
You obviously kind of operate in several different realms of practice, but do you think that there's ever any kind of crossover between the concepts or aesthetics, or vice versa, between kind of tattoos and graffiti? Or do you see them as kind of quite separate things? Because I know that some people really want to keep, tattooing is tattooing and graffiti is graffiti.
I try to do it at the beginning, cross them, and I just failed miserably. But I knew eventually I would have them working in harmony. I just didn't think it would take that long. Yeah, a lot of my realism, I actually implement a lot of techniques that I use in my graffiti. I've also weaved it in now with my tamako, my lettering. So I haven't kind of given it a name, but if you see it, you will know.
it's really interesting to hear about all those different organic kind of crossovers that happen between practices, because I think it's all kind of lessons learned, kind of amalgamated into one. And obviously in this conversation, we've touched on the realms of graffiti and tattoo, but at the same time, I know you also create murals. And I've seen you also recently kind of step back into the studio space, and particularly you're creating paintings/drawings on paper. But in the past, you've also explored the subject matter of portraits. But what you're currently kind of working on is a crossover between typography and script. So could you tell me a little bit about what types of paintings you're creating at the moment and what you're hoping to achieve with this current series of work?
Yeah, well, I've explored a lot of different styles, and the reason I like those three in particular is because I feel like it keeps every aspect of my tattooing sharp. In terms of if I'm doing tamako or lettering, there's flow, line work, which is all really important. And then if I'm doing realism, then I get to keep fine-tuning my shading. If I see someone that just does realism and then I watch them do a line and they can't line, then it's like you've kind of put a tool in the toolbox and it hasn't been used for ages, so it's not as sharp as it used to be. So that's the reason I've narrowed it down to those three. If I can use all three, use both techniques in one piece, then that's really satisfying for me, to do lines and shading. The murals, I do a lot of realism. It was always something that I wanted to understand. Like, one thing you'll probably learn about me is just because I do something doesn't mean I want to pursue it. It just means I want to understand it, and maybe I use that later on down the track. So portraits is one of the things, which and it's very people friendly, when you're painting a lot of our kids and stuff, which is like predominantly what I would subjects that I would paint, because I wanted to sort of uplift our younger generation and embrace their whatever culture they are, and I would paint people from that area, so there was like some form of connection, and it was always cool to see their faces as well when they turn up and they see their faces 10 meters high or whatnot. But I've gone through like a journey of painting portraits to and then now that I understand that process, now I've like kind of pulled things back and try to make things more like graffiti. Because when I got onto graffiti, I wanted to learn how to paint murals. And then I got to painting murals, and then it got to the point where I was bored. So now I'm trying to, and then like everyone's doing it almost. So now I'm trying to pull things back and go back to doing graffiti, because that's something that's sort of ingrained in us, and I feel like I can be more authentic.
Well, I know there's the murals, and you've also done some portraits, but you've also started another series of work which is a bit more illustrative. Could you tell me a little bit about what those are all about?
I've been like working on this, I've called it like run train, which is a term that I would use a lot when I'm going to do something, but like do something with like the intentions to smash it, and that could be anything. And I thought that concept could relate to everything, and I took one thing, which was our graffiti culture, the subway art, and then I try to be creative and paint like all these different trains, whether it's like do like a barber one or something, if you see or like a boombox if you're into music. And then that term like run train, like if you love music, it's like, oh, I'm gonna run train on this song. Or like, because when you paint a train, you're not there to take your time. You sort of seize the moment, and that's sort of my sort of like metaphor, for that, and I find it fun. I get to actually like create things from out of my head. It's sort of not just copying like a portrait, which is cool and everything, but I can push print on my printer and it does the same thing. There's no sort of challenge once you've figured out the formula. And sort of floating between that and then also trying to pull Māori work through my recent stuff that I'm doing now as well.
I mean, that's a really great segue to the next question, which is really about a trajectory that I think you've been working on for the past couple of years. And I've really noticed you kind of centering the context of your work a little bit more about your cultural identity. And so for our listeners, so that they are aware, what iwi are you affiliated with?
Ngāpuhi.
So what was actually the catalyst that prompted you to explore that part of yourself?
Comes down to that like sense of identity. Maybe I had to mature to this stage. I feel like I've acquired not all, but a lot of techniques over the years, and I've had to learn a lot of things. Like through Tāmako, I sort of learned, what the art of storytelling and telling that through tribal designs. Also with like our street art, like doing tags and stuff, that's always, if you're at the bus stop, you scribble your name. It's something that doesn't go away. And try to implement that into, I guess, I've always wanted those two to go hand in hand, but how that looked took a long time to sort of come to fruition.
For me, living as a kid in an urban city, and obviously a person that's immigrated to this country, I know that we live in an incredibly multicultural country now, but I also think that it's extremely westernized and can be at times quite monocultural, which has also made me feel quite culturally displaced or disconnected from my Chinese identity. So before you kind of started exploring your Māori heritage, were you ever disconnected from your culture?
Yes and no. Like, because we grew up, we got sent up north a lot. My nana, she speaks Te Reo. Me and we done like kapahaka up until I think we were in high school almost. But then there came a period where we did. There was sort of no use for it once you hit high school, or maybe there was. It just wasn't pushed. So I guess we felt a little bit disconnected from that point on. And then it's coming back to the tattooing. I did one tattoo in England and I did a Māori one, and I knew it didn't look right. And in that moment, that's what brought me home. I was like, shit, if I want to travel, then I need to learn how. Well, just because I did kapahaka didn't mean that I know how, the kurus and manayas and stuff are supposed to look. And so in that moment was when I knew I need to come home. And then that's when I started learning Tāmako. Started with Dave Hart at Native Ink in Whangarei. And his work I'm inspired by a lot of what he does as well. So he plays a big role in the beginning of my Tāmako journey, and I've pursued that ever since. And I always thought it would be cool to merge the two, but how that looks was also a journey in itself. And now I feel like, now that I understand like how I like my moko to look, as opposed to, and my lettering, I've figured out flows that where they work in harmony, and I will continue to develop it and see what comes of it until I exhaust that idea and maybe pursue something else, or continue to keep pushing it until, like everything else I've done in life, like the works that I'm creating now, they're not like traditional, like what you would normally see if you were to go to our marae. But if you see it, you can see heavy traditional bits through that are sort of weaved in with the graffiti, and I look at it like, our ancestors took inspiration from their environment, which was at the time probably, the birds, the sea, our mountains. I took that same approach, but like being a young Māori, during these times, things that inspire me are, empty spaces, like abandoned buildings, anything that I can put a mark on. So that's sort of how that sort of stemmed, but still trying to stay true to what they represent on both sides, also the graffiti and still trying to have solid letter forms, not trying to just add random bits for the sake of random bits. That it should serve a purpose, and same with the moko or the Māori stuff, doing that in a way where it's represented properly.
Absolutely, man. And I mean, it's always going to be difficult to grapple with this concept of culture and how to unpack all this kind of cultural baggage and history. However, I do know that in your kind of exploration of your identity, you do have a show coming up with your brother, which centers around your Māori heritage and its kind of intersection with graffiti, right? Could you tell me a little bit about the concept behind this exhibition?
Yeah, so how that came about was from that trip out to Dubai. Yeah, the name of the show is actually called Tawck Culture. We're basically taking our graffiti culture and our Māori culture and kind of just blending those two together in our own ways. I feel like our journeys we didn't plan to come this path. It kind of just happened. It's not like I just started doing this style like last week or something, or last month. It's been something I've been working on for years, but it's always sort of been in the background, and I kind of just been chipping away at it. And yeah, we had basically got like a month to produce all these works, which is something that we're really proud to share with everyone, because it's I think for other young Māori that might not be connected to their traditional side, maybe this speaks to them in a way where it allows them to maybe try to reconnect back to where they're from.
That's awesome, man, and I couldn't really agree more, because it's awesome seeing these paintings in this exhibition. And I guess one question that I do have is, with all of the work that you're creating at the moment in the studio for this show, is this the kind of future trajectory that you want to position your work in, like the context, like going in a gallery and like be a gallery artist? Is that what you're aiming for now?
I had a sort of a moment this year, and I decided, like, man, I've been, with the tattooing, it can kind of consume you. And then I got to a point where, man, it's cool, like you're tattooing, you're making good money, but then you get to a point like, okay, when that piece or person passes away, so does that piece. So now, and then I have no time, because I'm just constantly like a hamster on a wheel, just tattooing one after the other. Now I've like actually gonna probably do less. I actually am doing less tattoos, so working maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and I want to spend more time making as much art as I can while I'm here, because I feel it's important that, once you're done, what legacy do you leave behind? And if you're putting it on someone, that's like what that person's lifespan. So I've tried to think about the bigger picture, like, you know, the stories we leave behind, you know, not just once you're gone, but 80, 100, 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 years from now. Like, that's sort of what I'm aiming for, to sort of cement sort of my name or the kinds of work that I put out, and that's sort of where I want to focus on now. Well, as you get older, you start to realize your time is very important, and how you use that is up to you. You know, some people drink whatever every weekend. I'm thinking, oh, that's cool, but if you're not connecting with people or giving back or trying to do something that meaningful, then what's your purpose?
And kind of in closing, all of these practices that you've explored, what would you say are maybe 3 pieces of advice that you'd like to leave behind for maybe an emerging writer or an aspiring tattooist or even somebody trying to start their own business?
I would say learn your history, do your research, invest in yourself, and by yourself I mean like the time. If you're not willing to back yourself, then why should someone else? So that means putting in time into sacrificing something. So I believe you can't get anywhere if you're not willing to sacrifice something. You know, maybe it's a relationship, but yeah, and with that, just perseverance. You just got to keep doing it, make a shit ton of mistakes, and then I find usually within making those mistakes is usually where probably the magic happens, like because how you navigate out of those mistakes is usually when you come up with something that you don't intentionally plan on doing when you first get into something. So yeah, that would probably be my 3 things of advice. Yeah.
We obviously know that you're a risk taker and you're very brave, but do you ever have a fear of failure?
Nah, once when I fear something, then I know I have to do it. Yeah. Like,
that's you, but how do you instill that mindset into others, or how can others instill that mindset into themselves?
I see it more as a lesson. Like, there's been times where I've invested a lot of money into something that I thought was gonna, you know, really work, and then it didn't. But then I didn't feel bad about it because I was like, oh well, at least I tried. Like, and if I come across someone else that's about to go down that path, maybe I can share that with them. But yeah, that's probably how I would sort of approach it.
Love it, man. All right. Well, we might wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Tawck, for joining us on another episode of the Pavilion Project and kind of sharing your insights and knowledge. It's been incredibly awesome to hear about all the stuff that you've kind of experienced and all the lessons that you've taken away from that. I've obviously known you for so long, and I'm just so stoked to be able to sit down with you and have this chat after so long, and kind of hear about your journey and where you're up to at this point. And for me, I think my kind of key takeaways from this conversation is that in terms of like qualities, you definitely need persistence, perseverance, and you need to take risks, right? Because the risks are what challenges you to kind of keep elevating yourself, and even if it's kind of on an incremental level, and to not be stagnant too, you know. So thanks again for your time and sharing all of the stories for our listeners, and I'm sure they'll appreciate this too. So if you've made it through the whole episode and you've listened to everything, thank you very much for stopping by. Really appreciate it, and hopefully some of the visuals have given you an opportunity to observe Tawck's painting process and also understand a little bit about his kind of backstory. So in closing, our next episode or artist will feature my good friend PS5, who's also from TMD and part of an American graph crew called Lords. And I really look forward to sharing his work with you as one of the most kind of prominent commercial artists in Aotearoa that has been doing it also for over 20 years. So I'm really excited to share his story. So stay tuned for more episodes of the Pavilion Project. Peace.